Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. Pete Najarian and I will discuss exactly why gold is moving so much from London back into the United States, as well as some of the reactions to big headlines in stocks. And of course, there's a little hockey game that was played up in Canada. We'll have to touch on that. All that and more on today's Rebel's Edge. Bang!
Well, John, I'm up here in cold Minnesota because, Minnesota's never cold in January or February, but, they're making the biggest deal out of it in the world. I've never seen anything like it. But it is cold.
I remember when you and I grew up in Minnesota, because the first 12 years of my life, we were in California for the most part, folks, and barely saw snow ever. We had to travel up to Lake Tahoe to see it. And then we moved to Minnesota, and you get snow every winter. It's pretty regular, Pete, as well as cold weather, which is pretty regular. And I remember skiing when it was 60 below zero wind chill in Minnesota, Pete. I don't ever remember getting a snow day or a cold, in quotes, cold day, but that's what you guys got right now.
People will get mad at me, but the fact is we're getting damn soft is what it is. I truly mean that. I mean, the fact, you know what? People are still in their cars. Those people that are not going to school, you know what they're doing? They're going out and having fun, riding around in their cars, going to TJ Maxx, going to Target, going to Walmart, whatever, probably going for a burger,
But some of them probably going skiing. Oh, absolutely. It's too cold for school, but you can put on a parka and go skiing. So, yeah, I'm sure most of this, Pete, is the teachers union. I'm not ripping teachers, folks. I'm just saying that they probably are the ones saying that, hey, well, teachers might have trouble getting their cars started today or whatever. By the way, folks, if you're not familiar, in Minnesota, they plug in their cars. And I'm not talking about Teslas. I'm talking about regular engine block heaters that they plug in so that the car will start in the morning on cold mornings like this.
But if you don't have a garage, I mean, how many people don't have a garage? Anyway.
All right. Let's dive into Macro Minute, Pete. And here I'm going to get to talk just a little bit about that Canadian game that was played in Montreal between the Team USA and Team Canada. Now, first of all, I know this isn't the sports segment, Pete, but I'll make it as quick as I can. Hockey does this right. And I don't mean that, because there was a big fight, so John's a Neanderthal. Well, yeah, I do like big fights. But hockey actually plays hockey games for their all-stars, Pete. They don't, imagine that. They don't do that in football anymore. They don't do that in basketball. They do various weirdo skill competitions or touch football or, slam dunk contests. Baseball, at least they do line up and play in the All-Star game, Pete. So that's something. But Canada and hockey, they do it like this. They have Team USA, Team Canada, Team Sweden, and Team Finland. And when the U.S. team lined up to play Canada, I'm sure most of you know this, the Canadians were booing the national anthem because President Trump wanted them to be the 51st state, which most of them want too, Pete. 43% of the young people in Canada want to be part of the United States on the latest poll. And so you couple that with the regular folks who, by the way, are not happy about, you know what capital gains are in Canada, Pete? 66%. 66%. So if you made $100,000 on a stock trade that Pete and John talked about, and you live in Canada, you'd owe $66,000 to the Canadian Treasury. How do you like them apples? Well, so anyway, the United States beat the crap out. 9 seconds in, Pete, it was basically everybody on the ice got a 10-minute misconduct. They threw down their gloves, and the U.S. beat the crap out of the Canadian players. And then it got even worse, Pete. During the game, they were checking them into the boards, and the guys weren't getting up. I mean, it was a very rough game. And that's the way it should be in hockey, by the way. I played hockey. Pete played hockey. I still got a dislocated shoulder that I deal with all the time from being boarded. But anyway, Pete, so that's going to be my macro. I know I went way over a minute, but that is macro because that's real, and that is not some fake touch football or slam dunk contest. It's the real deal. You get to see real players play, and my hat's off to Canada, to the Finns, to the Swedes, and of course, Team USA.
Absolutely. Absolutely with you. All right, John, my macro is going to be real quick. It's going to be this. The data was a big deal last week, right? I mean, that's all we talk, this, that, and the other, or whatever. What did we do? Well, we generally just continued to just get the data, say, you know what? Okay, we understand. We're probably not going to cut. Now, I was already cooked in the books and all the rest of it. So what is really the most important thing, and I've been saying it for about 2 weeks now, earnings. That's what matters. People are looking at all the data and they digest it and everything else. But the reality has been each and every day, each and every week, we've had incredible earnings. It started with the financials, but this past week on Friday, you had Roku, you had Airbnb, you had Wynn, you had all these different names, and all they've done is completely crush it and doing an amazing job. And so with all that being said, I think it's an interesting thing to see how things are really going, and I think earnings really do matter. They're mattering now more than they ever have. Look where the Dow is versus the all-time high. Look at the S&P versus the all-time high. The NASDAQ versus the all-time high. We're pushing right up against it, John, and the data hasn't been there. So why are we there? Because of earnings.
Yeah, well, let's dive into fantastic futures next, Pete.
Yep.
And I won't go as long and be as verbose, but I will say that Doge, Elon and the boys are checking out Fort Knox because they're thinking, if we found all this fraud at USAID and all these other agencies, I wonder if the gold's really in Fort Knox and some of the other places like New York where we store it. So they're going to check it out. Is that the reason that so much gold is flying from London over to the United States right now, Pete? It's partially the reason, folks. The other reason is at these record highs for the yellow metal, what we're looking at is a $20 differential from London to the United States. Same product, exactly the same. It's not like crude versus Brent, WTI, West Texas Intermediate versus Brent. This is exactly the same thing, exactly those gold bars. And guess what? It's $20 more over here. So if you have it over in London, you're shipping it over here. And maybe one of the reasons it's more, Pete, is also because the United States might not have as much gold as we said. So that's a fantastic future if you own gold.
God, I feel like a James Bond movie or something like that. Gold figures. John, I'll just go real quick with this one. How about volatility? You know, we talk about it all the time, right? We were drifting lower, 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 lower. We were all the way underneath 15 just this past week. We've been as high as 1720 over the last month, been as low as where we were just this past week, which is in the upper 14s. I think the interesting thing, however, is the buyer today of the volatility index. So what are they doing? Well, they only came in to buy 112,000 of the March 24 calls, John, for 75 cents. That's a big size bid. That's a big size fill. And that's exactly what we've been seeing, more and more and more of this VIX buying. At some point, John, maybe we get a spike up there. And I will say what I was saying earlier today with Market Rebellion and the whole group over here. I said, look, we get that spike, you better be very, very active that day, because if we get that spike, it won't be there very long and it's going to pull right back down again. So interesting to see that maybe 50 Cent is behind this once again, but that's a huge call buying that we are seeing today in the volatility index.
It is huge, a massive call buying, and kudos to you and Mike Yamamoto and the team for getting it up there quick, Pete, for all of our subscribers. All right, let's talk for a moment about what we see in Berkshire Hathaway and Constellation Brands, because last week Berkshire filed, because they have to, folks, that they actually have 5.6 million shares. Now, if you take a look at a graph of Constellation Brands, you're going to see an ugly looking graph. So Buffett isn't saying, oh yeah, I bought this and aren't I smart? This thing has been sliding for months, Pete, sliding for years even. In fact, the highs are like almost 300 recently, and now, and as of just a little bit ago, is 160. So it's not like he's waving the flag saying, yeah, look what a brilliant guy I am, but he is buying into Constellation, Pete. So that's one of them on my radar right now that I'm saying, of all the things to buy, I kind of like that down as much as it is. So I'm looking for the unusual in there so I can buy some.
I think the Oracle is showing us the way, John. And I think you're exactly right. And I'm keeping my eye on it as well. It's been as low as 160. It's been as high as 274 over the last 52 weeks. It's trading 171. So we're pushing right on that number right now. And that's with the stock up 5% today. So yeah, very interesting. And I'll tell you this, John, how about the fact that the forward PE in this name is an 11? You know, you've got free cash flow of $1 billion. You know, is it undervalued? Yeah, it probably is. It's probably dramatically undervalued. Doesn't mean it has to go up, but I think that it will. And I'm looking at that revenue growth that we're talking about. That's what he was talking about as well, talking about revenue growth when it comes to the alcohol part of this whole thing. They really are crushing it at Constellation. I think that the Oracle puts $1 billion in there. I tell you what, that makes me, and I'm sure you, start thinking about, well, how much should I go into? Because I will be going into this name at some point soon.
Well, I know one that you're already in, Pete, is Micron Technology, MU. And MU announced plans to significantly increase production. Now, many of you will take a look at a chart and say, wow, has that thing really kind of had a rough 6 months or so? June of last year, Pete, it was 155, 160. It got down several times into the $84 level. Did that in September, in August, September, and then recently in at the end of December, it was also right there in the lows, basically at $80 a share. Well, it's back to 105 today. And I'm betting that this might be another one, Pete, that you might want to be adding to at this point.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, John. I mean, the reason why that you and I are talking about this one today and why it's starting to move to the upside is this increased production for this high bandwidth memory. And who out there is kind of interested in that? Well, somebody like Nvidia finds that pretty curious. Second half of 2025 is when they expect this thing to really start to take off again. Do we wait that long? I don't know. But I think this is one of those names, John, that we should watch very, very closely. To your point, it's still a lot closer to the lows than it is the highs, 80 to 160, you said. So at $1.05, up 6% today, it still has plenty of room to the upside. It trades at a very cheap valuation. And this is a company, John, that's accelerating. They're enhancing the experience of AI. I think there's a lot of reasons why this memory and this storage company really do have a good story to tell in the world that we're living in now, which is AI, AI, AI. I think Micron really should be a lot higher than it is. It might take some time to get rolling again, but that's why I think it's a second half trade.
Well, I would hold this one, Pete, and I would add to it on dips if you get any dips. But now let's talk about WeRide, a stock that was up 90 some odd percent last week, Pete. WeRide, it's a Chinese autonomous vehicle play, and Nvidia put a bunch of money into them last week. So how much does it trade on a daily basis? Because Pete and I kind of track that stuff pretty regularly. Well, normal turnover is 400,000. It traded 20 million last Friday, the last day that we traded before this week. It's only up 26% this week. So if you were one of those shorts in this one, you are in an even bigger world of hurt now. And it's trading pretty actively again today, Pete. 8.5 million shares in the first 2.5 hours of trading today.
Yeah, I think, you know what? I think we used to always want to follow around the Buffetts of the world, and then we started to follow around the politicians of our world. I think we might want to start following around Nvidia a little bit in this world that we're living in, because they're the ones that came out. They bought 1.7 million shares, John. They cut back in ARM holding. So they're shifting things around as well. It makes it pretty daggone interesting, I would say. They had a monster week last week. The stock, all you got to do is go back and take a look. John was showing you that chart just a second ago. But this is a stock that actually hit all-time highs today of 44. So it's been as low as 12. It's been as high as 44 today. And it's really been absolutely ripping to the upside. So I think there's a lot of reasons why this name is pretty damn interesting. It's really tough, so I get it. If somebody said to me right now, Peter, are you going to chase this thing up there at $42 or wherever it is right now? I'd go, it's really difficult for me to do that. I understand that, all of the backdrop of everything. We might get a little bit of a pullback. On some kind of a pullback, now I'm going to start looking at it again. But that's a monstrous move. Just take a look at what it did last week, folks. If you go back to last Monday to Friday, that's an amazing run that this thing has been on. And you can see it right there. Absolutely incredible. So it had that big jump on Friday. It's got an even bigger jump today. You might want to pause for a second.
Well, and Pete, as you say, they exited ARM Holdings. Nvidia did, folks.
Yep.
They exited Serve Robotics, and they also exited SoundHound. So our buddy Mark, the shark, Mark Lepresti, was in the SoundHound trade and killed it. I caught little bits here and there of the SoundHound trade, but I'm not in it anymore. But they exited those. And Pete, something else they bought other than WeRide? NBIS. So when you look at this, we did have unusual activity in NBIS, folks. Look at that. When that was moving to the upside, when it was, in the 30s, and today trades up through 42. Pretty nice to be basically coattailing on NVIDIA's smart team of, well, these guys are buying a lot of our chips, so they must be doing okay. Or however they're doing it well, Pete.
Yeah.
Last one, GDS Holdings. This one up as much as 44% today. GDS is a Chinese, data center. But they gave up a lot of that really quick. I mean, the stock opened at 41.69. It ran to 42 and then pulled back to 41 pretty quick.
Yeah, this is one of those that, a lot of people are wondering if it's Trump and the tariffs and all the rest of it, and maybe that actually gave it a little bit of an extra. I look at that chart, though, John. I mean, the chart that was up there, this has been a stock that has been just on this great move to the upside, bottom left to the upper right. Well, this is exactly what this thing, look at February. I mean, an absolute run the entire month so far that's been ripping to the upside. So you do have a company that's got some cash burn. You're talking about $5 billion worth. They've got some huge debt, but as of right now, this is the place to be. It's not a name that I know well enough, John. I do know data centers, but this one I'm not as familiar with. I'd have to get a lot more information to understand it better. This is a China company for those who don't know that. So just keep that in mind as well. But it's interesting. I'm not there, but I'm certainly it's got my attention. So I'm going to certainly look at this thing a lot closer over the next couple of trading days. That's for sure. I'll give you an update if I do something too.
All right. Thank you. Well, now, folks, we're going to show you a little something about how the Eagles built perhaps a dynasty. Now, many of you remember that the Eagles have now twice in the last decade won the Super Bowl. First time they did it was with Carson Wentz. And he wasn't supposed to be the guy, Pete. They had a quarterback that they thought was going to be the guy. And then Carson Wentz stepped in there. Isn't he one of those South Dakota or North Dakota guys, Pete?
North Dakota State. Yeah.
North Dakota State. Yep. They put out players, folks. And tight ends and quarterbacks, and a lot of linemen now too. But anyway, So they win the Super Bowl. Then they trade the Super Bowl quarterback, Pete. How many times has that happened? Well, take a look and listen, and you'll see how they built what I say is a dynasty.
Yep.
Have you guys seen the Carson Wentz trade and how it turned out now?
Yeah.
Now that's fully done. So they gave up Carson Wentz, and they ended up getting Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Jalen Carter, and Cooper DeJean with those picks. They turned those picks into those four players.
Yeah, because Carson played like 80% of the snaps that year.
Yeah.
And they were able to turn that
greatest
third into
haul.
a second or something like that.
That's the greatest haul I've ever seen. That in
Agreed.
itself, he changed the fact that how he moved off of Doug Peterson after winning the Super Bowl, moved off of Carson Wentz. He was like, shit, we paid him. It doesn't matter. He doesn't care. But the way they structure contracts is because of the owner willing to shell out money for signing bonuses, because other owners don't want to shell out upfront money, but they do that. And that's why they have more cap space coming down the line. That's why I think they're going to be the next dynasty.
He's right on.
He makes a great point.
And
Yep.
John, here's the thing. Howie has done an amazing job of drafting. It's one thing to go out in free agency, which they did, and that's always a difficult thing to do, right? Because why is this guy going to be better with you than somebody else? Blah, blah, blah. You go through all those things. Or, does he fit on your team? Saquon's a great example of that. It was the perfect thing to do. They added him to what they'd already built. But what Howie has built is an offensive line, a defensive line. You heard one of the trade being with Carter. I mean, they've got guys that they were willing to take very, very high draft picks, as opposed to going, you know what, we need a quarterback. And then you don't have an offensive line, so the guy gets the crap kicked out of him. And I kind of put Sam Darnold like that in most of his early parts of his career. This year with the Vikings, he had all the explosive people he needed and a decent, not a great, but a decent offensive line, right? So he got sacked a lot. But it sure made him look a hell of a lot better because of the fact that he had 3 great receivers, a really good couple of tight ends, and a nice running back, and an okay offensive line. So Howie knows how to build the team, and it's amazing to me how many GMs sit out there, John, and have no clue. They just go for the sparkle of, well, he did run a 4.3 at the combine. Yeah, but on the field in full uniform, he runs a 5.0 40 because the guy can't get anybody. I mean, it's really comes down to that sometimes, I think, and it's kind of crazy when you get it. But I think these guys are dead spot on, don't you think?
I did. I thought that was absolutely. And who did they take advantage of with that trade, folks? The Colts and the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Two teams that have perennially been bad in the last decade. The Cowboys, of course, haven't gone to the Super Bowl and shoot, Pete. I think your daughter is like 27 years old or something like that, whatever she is. I think it's been that long since the Cowboys were at the big dance.
I think you're right. All right, John. So let's jump into the NFL. One of the things that we were talking about, it starts with Wentz, right? Where do all these quarterbacks end up? Because we already went through the coaching carousel. So I've got a couple of lines, and I'll throw them by you one by one. I think the best fit right now, if he's truly going to keep playing football, I think Aaron Rodgers goes to the Steelers because they're willing to move on from what they did last year, where they get one young quarterback, one old quarterback, and they kind of piecemeal them back and forth. I think they want to have a quarterback for 1 year. That's a team that's a quarterback away, in my opinion, Pittsburgh, from going to the Super Bowl. And they just don't have the right guy there. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is, but I think there's a possibility. How about you?
Well, I think that's a real possibility, Pete. Unfortunately for Justin Fields, it's a real possibility because Justin Fields, of course, was the Bears' #1 pick. He had 3 coordinators in as many years. The poor kid had no offensive line to speak of. And then when they finally got him some targets, they didn't have enough money, like you said, to pay the offensive line. So he just was, sacked a record number of times, just like Caleb Williams has been sacked a record number of times. So that might be a great fit. It will depend what they're willing to give up because Aaron is expensive and the Jets know they made a mistake because he played, 5 plays in the first year, and then this year was a bust as well. At least he stayed healthy for the most part. But I think Justin Fields would not be happy about that, but I think that could come to pass, Pete.
It could. I'll go through a couple other ones real quick for you. So Stafford, so he wants to get out of LA unless they want to pay him because he wants the real money. He doesn't have the real money relative to a lot of the other quarterbacks that are out there. So he wants a little bit more money. His brother-in-law just got the quarterback job at the Giants. So I think he's got a little leverage on LA right now to say, hey, look, maybe I go and play with the Giants then, the hell with it. But so that's a possibility. Cam Ward probably gets drafted by somebody. Maybe it's New Orleans. Maybe it's whomever the hell it is, but somebody will go for the quarterback early because they always have to do that. It's not a good move, I don't think. But how about Kirk Cousins, John? Where does he end up? I think here's the ones I've got for you. He played for Stefanski, who is now the head coach at Cleveland, but when he was with the Vikings. So maybe does he go to Cleveland? Cleveland doesn't have anybody. They got a bunch of nobodies, but they
Jameis Winston.
Well, yeah.
Famous.
They do have that. They've also got a guy who as long as he can stay out of jail and he can stay out of this and he doesn't have his, Achilles and all the rest of it. I mean, that, it's a nightmare for those guys and all the money and everything else. How about Sam Darnold though? Here's what I got for you, Darnold. Darnold goes to one of these three, but I think it's the Raiders, number one. So does he go to the Raiders? He gets there with Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll didn't coach him, but Pete Carroll knows him well, USC days. And I think he likes what he saw this past year for Pete Carroll. So that would make a lot of sense. Pete's a defensive coach. He can have somebody else coaching him. I think that's pretty interesting spot. Maybe the Saints, maybe Cleveland. Somebody who's ready to actually make the next step is where I think Sam could go. Could be the Raiders. And I think it could be a lot of fun if he actually got there. What do you think about that one?
I like that one. And you already mentioned Stafford, Pete. If Stafford leaves, I think they go for Darnold.
Yep.
I'm not kidding you. I think if Stafford, if they get something for him, or if it just ends up being that, I don't think they're going to franchise tag him, because franchise tagging a quarterback these days is $45 million, $50 million. That's because you got to pay him. What is it? The top 4 or top 5, Pete?
Something like that, John. Yeah. So I can't remember the number. I know it's north of 41 million. So whatever it is, it's a big number.
Yeah. So if Stafford leaves, and he shouldn't. He should do what he wants to do, but they shouldn't let him go.
No.
But if they do, they got to get somebody like Darnold or whatever, because they got a big stadium to fill, Pete.
Yep.
And if they just bring up some rook, they're not going to fill that stadium.
No, I'm with you. All right, let's go to the most exciting thing in the planet Earth, the NBA All-Star Game, John. So here's where we talked about hockey and how great that was. And we know the NFL stinks, but when it comes to the NBA, how about this? Too much Kevin Hart is one of the things that people are talking about. The new format is another. Everybody seems to hate it. Everybody thinks it stinks. You got Draymond Green, a player who's out there and being probably as critical, and I think he should be, as critical as he wants to be against the NBA. He throughout the All-Star game, John, he's putting out stuff about what a piece of crap this game is and how it's awful. And the format is stupid. Unwatchable is the thing that I walked away with. Everybody that I saw who's an NBA player was using the word unwatchable. Kenny Smith over at TNT, those guys over there, he said this was a format failure. They better not do it ever again. So a lot of really, really good endorsements to what Silver's doing here with the NBA, right? I mean, he's also the same guy, John. I will say this. He's a great negotiator. He got an 11-year, $76 billion deal for the NBA through ESPN and all the rest of these guys. The NFL is much bigger. In 2021, they got $110 billion. So they both have these huge numbers. NFL's bigger. NFL makes a lot more sense. The viewership is down 19% versus last year and down 25%, including the NBA TV, if you include that. So we know that there's problems. The NBA is not addressing them. As a matter of fact, they're doing something even worse. They're creating an all-star game that people are all talking about as maybe the worst thing they've ever seen. So what does Silver have to do? Just walk away and say, thanks a lot, guys. It was great being here, or what?
His legacy sucks, Pete. He's just killed his legacy. Yeah, it's a great money grab by him. Like you say, 70 mil, I'd take it. Yeah. But if I wanted my legacy to be that I was a great executive and a steward of that league, he is not either of those two things. Ratings have gone down, down, down since he's been there. And I don't see them coming back, Pete. I really don't. The game, players like LeBron James, when they decide the day before the game or the day of the game, they're not going to play, like you say, load management. Mm-hmm. And then LeBron, for the team picture, did you see that, Pete? Mm-hmm. Team picture, they line up, they're all in uniform. He's in his street clothes, just holding a basketball. And it's kind of like, what?
It's a good team player.
Yeah.
John,
the worst.
We can have guys coming after us for the LeBron hate. but LeBron creates it himself. I mean, that alone says it all. Really? You're going to be in street clothes and everybody else. It's kind of like what happened, in the past with Russell Wilson, where he had his own locker room. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, do you really want to be a part of the team? Are you a team player, or are you just a really good player? And so because you're really good, you should be treated special. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how that works.
I've got a video for you, Pete, that I'll put up tomorrow for sports of LeBron. And I think it's Stephen A. Smith ending all the GOAT talk once and for all. So we'll preview that for you tomorrow, folks. But, well, thanks, Pete. Thanks, Jared. It's great being here back this week. Of course, yesterday was a holiday, so we can expect that we'll see a volume building throughout today, tomorrow, and into this next weekend. But we appreciate all of you joining us. I'll be on with Charles Payne on Friday, Pete.
That should be good.
Making Money with Charles Payne, bang, on the Fox Business Channel. And we hope all of you will tune in tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for another Rebel's Edge.